Welcome everyone to the January 20th City Council work session. Welcome to everyone here and at home. We have two topics today, both very interesting ones and both involving downtown. City Manager?
Thank you, Mayor, and I'll turn it over to Amanda and her team to get us started.
Good afternoon. Following direction Council gave in December, this is the second work session on downtown high-speed fiber and park block improvements, both of which relate to larger efforts on economic prosperity and fostering a welcoming downtown for everyone. Last week, you did an initial review of high-speed fiber and park blocks improvements. Today, we'll start with a bit more information on those from Ann and Will. Then I'll summarize the funding options for you to use in your discussion. We'd like to hear your questions and clarifications in advance of next week's work session, where we'll be looking for direction. I'll hand it to Ann.
Thank you. Good afternoon. The Council asked us for more information about how the fiber network will impact the broader community. And I want to provide a little bit of background on that issue. The primary impacts to the broader community include increased economic opportunity and an expanded tax base that supports citywide services. There's extensive evidence from cities that have established fiber networks that fiber infrastructure enhances a community's ability to attract and retain jobs for a broad spectrum of skill levels. A high-speed telecommunication network offering service at competitive rates creates an environment that allows businesses to thrive. One study from the U.S. Government Accountability Office analyzed the impact of broadband deployment on small businesses, and that analysis found that increased speed and improved reliability have helped small businesses improve efficiency and streamline operations. That study cited an example in Sandy, Oregon, a town of about 10,000 people that lies between Mount Hood and Portland. Sandy has a citywide municipal network. A small Sandy firm reported in that study that the high-speed connection allows it to send and receive large data files that it used to be sent via overnight delivery, greatly improving its efficiency. Lafayette, Louisiana, a town of about 125,000 people, has a fiber optic network. The community's infrastructure, along with the University of Louisiana at Lafayette's computer science program, has helped to attract a wide variety of tech firms. Multiple tech companies have moved to the city, creating thousands of jobs, and the city's become known as the Silicon Bayou. In Tennessee, a town called Morristown built a network offering gigabit speeds. This town of about 30,000 people has seen an expansion in blue-collar jobs and new investments that have expanded the property tax base. Fiber is rarely the sole reason for selecting a location, but it has become a deciding factor. Corporate site selectors have been placing more and more emphasis on broadband internet access as they look for locations in which their companies can thrive. For many firms, high-speed telecommunications infrastructure has become essential infrastructure. An example is the Dalles, east of Portland along the Columbia River. Google invested $1.2 billion in a data center that uses the city's municipal fiber network, creating about 200 jobs and new tax revenue. The Dalles also offers large and reliable supply of electricity from nearby hydroelectric dams, but the fiber network was a deciding factor. The city of the Dalles has benefited. The city manager reported that new revenue has helped pay for new public safety and recreational infrastructure that's used by the whole community. In Eugene, the fiber implementation plan covers a small portion of the whole city. However, it covers a key employment center. And this map shows jobs per block. It's employment density. The downtown has a high concentration of employment. It is our major employment center. The multiple story buildings in our city center create a dense employment center. Recent improvements to existing buildings have made the downtown an even denser employment center. The Broadway Commerce Center used to be vacant, and now it's full of people working. There's a wide variety of jobs in the downtown. Investing in the downtown creates employment opportunities for people across the community. New private investment in the downtown also expand the tax base, benefiting the community at large. Improvements made to private buildings, such as the IDX building at Oak and Broadway and the Broadway Commerce, have increased those buildings' taxable value, growing the tax base for the whole community to benefit from. Our existing infrastructure is limiting our economic growth. There was public testimony last week where a new firm in downtown Eugene reported that they wanted to hire 12 people, but realized they could only make 9 video calls with their current internet service, and so they were only able to hire 9 people. Your packet included a map of the study area that the fiber planning team has been using to plan the fiber build. As our engineering work has proceeded, we found that electrical conduit east of High Street lacks enough capacity to accommodate that microduct tubing. It won't be possible to use the same technical method that we used in the pilot across this whole study area. At this stage in the planning, the area where we can use the microduct within existing electrical conduit covers a smaller area than the study area. And the blue on this area shows the current planned service area. The buildings within this boundary, which roughly extends from Charnelton on the west, south to 13th, and then sometimes up to 11th, east to High, and north to 5th. It's possible to extend the fiber network beyond this blue area, but the completed engineering plan and the current cost estimate cover this service area. Extending the service area will add cost. I'll hand it to Will.
Thank you. Before discussing funding options for park block improvements, we thought it would be helpful to clarify what sort of projects might be considered for the funding. Following last week's work session, we gathered the comments from Council's discussion, arranging them into a series of potential actions for improving the park blocks. This list is not exhaustive. There are intermediate options between those described here, nor are the options exclusive of one another. The intent is to provide a rough sense of the range of options and then attach order of magnitude cost estimates to them. The first option does not include any changes to the physical form of the park blocks, but uses programmed events as the means of generating more activity. In addition to current events such as the Saturday Market, Farmers Market, Occupy Medical, and the Tuesday Farmers Market, this option could bring multiple programmed activities to the park blocks each week throughout the spring, summer, and fall. I want to reiterate at this point that this option is not exclusive of any of the other options that I will talk about. But presumably, there would need to be some initial investment in basic amenities like signage, security, and furniture, which we estimate to be $100,000 to $200,000. Although the primary costs would be the ongoing expense of staff and materials at approximately $100,000 annually. We heard from a number of councilors the importance of public engagement and a needs assessment process to identify improvements that would A, simultaneously serve the emerging downtown neighborhood and the entire community, and B, address deficiencies in accessibility and design to make the park blocks more welcoming, inviting, and connected. As you know, a genuine community engagement process does not presume a specific outcome, and so there is a range of potential results and a range of potential costs that if this is the preferred direction. Depending on the level of public engagement and the geographic scope in question, this cost could range between $75,000 and $350,000. One comment last week was that sprucing up the park blocks might go a long way. By addressing the low-hanging fruit of infrastructure needs, this approach would focus on basic concerns such as lighting, seating, and restrooms, as well as minor cosmetic improvements to paving and landscaping. This approach would not tackle larger issues such as the butterfly lot, and as such could be limited as a means of finding a permanent home for the farmers market. These improvements could cost $1 to $2 million. As I noted before, these cost estimates are very rough and are only intended to give a rough order of magnitude cost. A comprehensive look at 3 park blocks, a blank slate option would include acquiring and demolishing the butterfly lot, and reincorporating the Northwest Park block into our public open space, as well as creating a farmers market building. This approach could also implement other ideas from the 2006 master plan, including the integration of Park Street as a flush shared space pedestrian improvements on Oak and 8th, significant improvements to the paving and landscaping of the South Park blocks with a focus on an accessible and inviting design, and the incorporation of family-friendly elements. The cost for this level of implementation would vary depending on the ultimate design, but could range between $15 and $25 million. We heard concern from councilors that a focus on the park blocks alone might be too narrow a scope, and that it might fail to capitalize on potential synergies between downtown open spaces or result in redundancies. The Park Blocks Plus option would be a system-based approach to coordinate improvements in the park blocks with those in other downtown open spaces and the connecting pathways, including the Willamette to Willamette initiative on 8th Avenue. This option is first and foremost a planning strategy, not a specific set of improvements. It's possible that a Park Blocks Plus approach could result in either the spruce up or blank slate options mentioned before, or some other outcome. Similarly, improvements to other parts of the downtown open space could range from minimal to significant based on the needs, opportunity, and community vision. Project costs could thus vary widely depending on the project scope. As mentioned before, if we ask the broader community a question, the answer might be something we had not considered. It should go without saying that the costs would then depend on the potential project scope for this one as well. This range of options, from programming and activation to small targeted improvements, to a comprehensive redesign, to a system plan, to other concepts emerging from a public process, demonstrates the spectrum of potential projects. The park blocks have a rich history as our community's town square and the home of beloved institutions. Today, as we consider issues with the friendliness, activity, and accessibility of the space, we are presenting a range of options that have different cost implications, as a background for your conversation about funding options and a later conversation about direction. I'll now pass it back to Amanda to talk about those funding options.
So the funding options roughly fall into these 4 categories. These represent ways to pay for the city portions of projects. To help you get started with your discussion, I'll describe 12 tools within categories and provide general advantages and disadvantages. Some of the options apply to both the fiber and the park blocks projects. Others are relevant to only one or the other. We'll start with a general obligation bond. These are voter-approved bonds that are repaid with property taxes. Examples include the parks and open space bonds or the street repair bonds. GO bond provides a new revenue source that the community understands. However, the outcome is unknown. It requires a vote, and it requires lead time for scheduling. It reduces the capacity to issue debt for other projects, and it increases taxes. Local option levies are voter-approved property tax, pay for either operating or capital over a 5 to 10 year period, depending on the purpose of the levy. An example is the library local option levy for operations. It's a new revenue source, and the community seems familiar, although it's not ideal for long-term expenses or capital expenses because it counts under the Measure 5 cap. The outcome is unknown, there are other priority needs, and it increases taxes. Funding option number 3 is using existing general city revenue. It's the most flexible funds, and it's applicable for both of these projects. It's not an increase in taxes. While the fund has stabilized post-recession, there are still insufficient resources to sustainably fund existing services. Telecom Registration Licensing Fund are fees and taxes from telecommunication service providers in Eugene. They can be used to develop and implement telecommunications policies, programs, and projects. This fund has been used to support technology advancements to the city organization and community that would otherwise leave functional deficits, especially in the area of public safety. They could be used for the fiber project under the fund's legal limitations. However, other projects compete for the limited resource. Funding option number 5 is Parks System Development Charges, SDCs. They're collected on new development in the city and used to fund park construction and rehabilitation. Park SDC fees are set based upon an approved project list. Park Blocks expansion and a children's playground downtown are on the approved project list, which makes them eligible for park SDCs with priority ratings of 2 and 4. Actually funding them, however, would mean taking funding away from priority 1 items on the approved project list. The transient room tax, or TRT, is collected from all overnight stays in the city under the authority of a city ordinance. It funds promotion and development of tourism and visitor programs. It's an existing program. Current TRT dollars are fully programmed, so an increase in the rate would be required to add services. However, raising tax rate would incrementally add to the cost of recreating in Eugene. Any increase would need to comply with state law restrictions on spending. Historically, the city tries to move increases in concert with Springfield to maintain competitive balance. Additionally, the state is considering an increase for the track and field world championships. Tools 7 through 9 relate to urban renewal. Number 7 is using existing funds from the downtown district. Funds are available for park block improvements to benefit the farmers market. The farmers market maintains interest in creating a permanent year-round home in downtown and continues to work with both the city and county to identify the key next steps towards that goal. However, the $500,000 that's set aside for improvements was determined prior to the potential butterfly parking lot land swap concept with Lane County, which may need an increased investment. This is the only remaining project in the downtown district plan. As you saw in attachment C of your packet, the tax increment financing will cease when we have sufficient revenues to repay the debt, which is estimated for December of 2016. The farmers market funds would still be available to use regardless of what happens with the downtown district. If council wanted to extend the downtown district, it could be amended. Attachment C also provides these details, which are based on state statute. To summarize, amending the plan would start with council initiating the amendment process, which would need to happen in the near future. It would be followed by a significant public process completed over a period of months before a final decision. If amended, urban renewal could fund capital and program administration costs within the core area of downtown. An advantage is that the district is in place and it wouldn't increase taxes. It does, however, require a council to approve a plan amendment to extend it and add projects. Those individual projects would later need to be approved by the agency board in its annual budget process. Urban renewal is only for projects within the boundary, although the boundary could be adjusted as part of the amendment process. Using it would continue redistribution of taxes. Funding option number 9 is Riverfront Urban Renewal, which can fund capital and program administration costs in the core riverfront area. There's no increase in taxes. However, only projects within the boundary are eligible. The eWeb redevelopment is an existing priority for these funds, and it continues the redistribution of taxes. This map shows the two districts. The downtown district is on the left side, and the riverfront is on the right side and runs along the river. They meet at Pearl Street. Funding option number 10 includes federal, state, private grants. An example is using the Road Capital Fund for changes to streets that surround the park blocks. It also includes donations, which could be raised for certain park blocks related costs. These would be non-city funds. On the other hand, the outcome is unknown. They rely on a competitive process, and limited types of projects are eligible. For the fiber project, we've identified one grant from a federal agency. Based on preliminary feedback from the Economic Development Administration, or EDA, the grant amount could cover about $1.25 million of the fiber project's costs. We have also identified a State of Oregon grant that offers up to $500,000 for infrastructure investments that are tied to job creation. Both the federal and state grants are competitive. We cannot predict if we will receive those funds. If we receive both grants, we will need to identify about $2 million in local funds. The Downtown Service District collects fees from property owners located in the service district based on occupied square footage. Downtown Eugene, Inc., or DEI, receives and administers the funds. It is an existing program that would need to be adjusted. However, raising the fee rate adds costs that are likely passed to the tenants as higher rent, which incrementally adds to the cost of doing business downtown. Lastly, the private funding option is for the fiber project. We've been in contact with property owners who have expressed a willingness to pay to connect their buildings. If we do use private funds, the funding mechanism must be fair and transparent. Staff are working to identify the most appropriate way to bring in private funds. We created this visual representation of the information you've just received, with the funding sources on the left side and the projects across the top. The match between the tool and the project is shown with an X. Overall, it's not quickly digestible picture, but what it does show is that not every tool works for every project, and a copy is at each of your places. We're here to listen to your thoughts and answer questions. Sue, Nan, Denny, and Neil are also here to answer questions. We've provided a lot of information, and we'll be back next week looking for direction. Thank you.
Betty and George Poling in the queue, and Mike.
Did you get Claire?
And Claire. Okay, and Alan. Almost everybody. Betty, you're up.
Thank you. That was a lot of information, and it will take some time to digest all that, but I did a good job of giving us information. You mentioned a land swap. Is there, we don't have anything going on right now, do we? Is that something imminent so that we should?
It's not imminent. Remember, and it's been a while since that topic came up at council in the context of the farmers market and the county's desire to eventually build a courthouse, and that topic. And the idea that came up was the western half of the city hall block, if we swap that for the butterfly lot. There's nothing imminent in that conversation.
But there isn't any indication that the county wants to do that, is there?
I think the county has a real interest in finding space for a permanent full farmers market in the downtown. They also want to make sure they have secure space for their courthouse, so they do have interest in both of those.
Okay. Is City Hall in the Riverfront Urban Renewal District?
No, it's not.
When you said they meet at Pearl, it sounded as if it had to be in one of the districts.
Just briefly, they meet at Pearl. Where they meet is on Pearl Street, but it doesn't
but
go all the way
it
down.
doesn't include that.
Right.
Okay. Parks SDC sounds like a good thing to me for the park blocks. And I think that the restroom is number one on what people want. When people talk about not using the park blocks, I think it's because they have to go away to go to the restroom, and especially if they bring children or anyone who's been shopping for a while or walking around, it seems like just the number one thing. And if we have money for that, could the money that's reserved be used for a restroom there?
Are you talking about the
$500,000?
No, it can only be used for the farmers market. It's specific to.
But John was just talking about using it for the park blocks.
If the assuming that the farmers market improvements occurred on the park blocks, or it could be on the butterfly lot, but it has to be used for improvements that relate to the farmers market.
And the restroom would not?
Perhaps as part of a broader project for the farmers market, it could be, but it couldn't be a standalone restroom just for the farmers, just for
Yeah.
the park blocks.
Okay, then next question, and as you know, I'm absolutely opposed to extending the downtown urban renewal district, but how much money is left in that we could direct to whatever we choose? Anybody know?
So, Betty, let me ask, there's the $500,000 that can be used for farmers market.
No, I'm talking about the other money in the urban renewal district.
So for the downtown district, you can't spend any other money because the last plan amendment limited the expenditures to certain items, and it's the farmers market that is the only item where the funds haven't yet been expended.
But there is other money which we could, I'm asking, could we redirect, not the part for the farmers market, but there's other money that is still there.
There's no other money in the district other than that $500,000.
There's no other money?
Well, there's the loan money.
Right. Yeah.
So Betty, there's money that's being used to pay off the debt that was incurred to do certain
Right.
things. That money has to go to pay off the debt.
Of course.
There are funds other than the tax increment funds, which I think is primarily the loan dollars. And that's it's a revolving loan, and those dollars can still be used even after the tax increment ceases to be collected.
How much is in that?
We have just over $1 million right now in the loan program.
Oh, okay. What I'm wondering is if we could use that money as a loan to open up Kesey Square, to open up the walls on Kesey Square.
Well, Denny, you can probably answer, or Amanda. That money isn't urban renewal dollars, or you can.
The money is a special set-aside funds that we have used in a revolving loan fund. It's right now it's loaned out for various downtown projects, small and large redevelopment projects. I think it would really mean at this point collapsing that program and shifting those funds elsewhere is the mechanism for using it elsewhere.
But what I'm getting at is there's some money that's council could decide to redirect.
So, for example, the loan fund, if you chose to no longer have a revolving loan fund, you could take those monies and redirect those to Kesey Plaza or anything else you would want to do.
And because it's a revolving loan fund, the monies go out, they come back in, and so the balance that's available that is always changing. It's not really a stagnant balance that's available because we're making loans, we're collecting payments. So it varies from time to time as far as how much. Sometimes there is no money available in that fund because we have loaned it all out. Sometimes there is. We've had payoffs recently. A couple of projects have paid off, so we have maybe a little bit more cash than we normally do.
So there is no money other than that's flexible. That council could decide to use for something different from what it's been designated for.
I want to make sure I understand your question because your entire general fund budget's flexible, and so I just want to make sure I'm.
No, I'm talking about the urban renewal fund.
Okay.
I think within the Urban Renewal Fund, the only way to use any resources would be via a plan amendment that would extend the district at this point.
Be what, Denny? I couldn't-
A plan amendment that would extend the district and authorize new projects to be funded under the Urban Renewal Plan.
So you're saying there's nothing left otherwise. That's okay. That's all. Thank you.
Next up is George Foley.
Thank you. A couple of questions first. On one of the slides, it said something about reclaiming the butterfly lot. That's just the portion of that block that is currently flat concrete. We're not talking the butterfly parking lot, right? Or are we talking about the?
That is what I was talking about, the reclaiming the entire parking structure. The 2006 master plan, which is what we were using as a starting point for thinking about the blank slate approach, demolishes the parking structure, levels that out, uses the north end along 7th Avenue as a redevelopment opportunity site, either for public or private use, and then cuts Park Street through in the middle of that block, similar to the way it wraps around the South Park blocks, And then the resulting piece is a third park block, similar to the other two, that would then be an opportunity for a farmer's market building.
And that's currently owned by the county now, right?
Yes.
And have we had any recent conversations with the county about their intended use or purposes for that butterfly lot?
Yeah, I could probably weigh in on that. Periodically, Steve Mokrahysky and I talk about any numbers of things, and the butterfly lot does come up. They have not made any commitments to what they want to use that as a future use, whether they want to keep a courthouse there, whether it would be available for this kind of a project or not. My sense is they're open to all those kinds of conversations, but not have had any commitment to where they see the future of that lot yet.
And the deed restriction is still in place on that property as far as its use?
Nothing has changed in terms of what I advised now probably 12 or 18 months ago. And so that hasn't changed. But in terms of what we were talking about before, our conclusion was the deed was not an impediment to doing that.
Next question is about the telecom funds, and it's a two-part question. If you don't have the answer, if you get it later, that'd be fine. Is how much is there in the telecom funds, and how much of that is being projected to be used in the new City Hall project for telecommunication purposes? So you get back to me on that one? Okay. As far as the increase in the TRT, I'm a little concerned about that. In fact, I've got an executive committee meeting today with Travel Lane County. We're currently having the discussion about the implications of the increase in the TRT statewide. We're still tossing back and forth both discussions, whether yes or no, good or bad. So any discussions on that, I think, about raising the city's TRT should wait until at least the state decides what they're going to do. And in reference to the urban renewal districts, is it possible to use the funds from, say, the Riverfront Urban Renewal District just for that part of the fiber optic that is within the boundary, and then the downtown renewal or is it kind of all one major project and you can't split up the costs?
You could certainly use Riverfront Urban Renewal District dollars to undertake fiber optic inside the Riverfront District.
Right.
Yeah, so in that sense, you could split that up.
So, and then kind of a follow-up on that is, how do we get started with extending the downtown urban renewal district for funds possibly to use for this fiber optic project?
At your meeting for next week, if you're interested, we can certainly provide a motion that would direct staff to start putting that together, lay out what it would look like, give you the more specific timeline. Okay. But that's what we were envisioning for today is information, questions, and then if you tell us what kind of motions you would like, we can certainly have those available for you as part of either your packet or just individually for your meeting next week.
Appreciate that. I'd like to have that. And then my biggest concern about the new taxing, either a general obligation bond or a operating levy, is, to me, it looks like that we're starting to piecemeal our overall budget for special projects, which I'm not a real fan of, but especially when we have other priorities, for example, like overall park maintenance. So I'm not real sure about the general obligation or the operating levy as a way of funding these projects.
Mike, you're next.
Thank you, Mayor. If you put all the stuff together for the Parks Plus and everything we want to do with fiber, give me a round number that's a guess, just round, just $4 million?
The total cost for
More or
the
less.
fiber is 3.8.
So let's say it's 5. Let's just, for hypothetical sake, say it's 5. How much time does that add to the urban renewal district downtown? How long would it take to repay that? So if we extended the urban renewal district, how much time would it take to pay back $5 million as that if we extend it? To what point will we have to extend it?
We'd have to do that. I think you're assuming that we would go into debt to pay for that, and we'd have to do the calculations. But the district generates a couple of $1 million a year in revenue.
So 2 years, 2.5 years? More or less?
A good guess. At this
So we're
point, yeah.
talking about 2 or 3 years extension to the Urban Renewal District to have it all paid for and be able to do it quickly. That was why I included it on my motion, because it's the easiest way to do it. It only extends the district for a little bit of time, and we get it done, and speed matters. And I'll get back to that in a second. So Neil over here, can you tell me, Neil, how far we are through the Parks project list on the 20-year list, and where we are in time in that list? Are we in year 12 and got like 5 or 10% of those projects done, something like that?
From the 06 plan
Right?
list,
So we're 10.
I would, yeah, I've never really thought about it that way, but out of 200.
I'm sorry, I apologize.
projects-
Not the 06 bond, but from
06 plan, not the bond.
from the SDC list, the
Yep.
20-year SDC list. Okay.
Well, you know, there's over 200 projects on there.
Right?
We've worked through most of the priority ones, and we're into priority twos now. I would say,
We 10%
gosh,
through the
very
list.
roughly, no, I would say more than 10%, 15-ish.
And we're in year 10? I thought we were in 11 last year when we were talking about it. That's why I bring it up. So it was 06 that we created that 20-year list.
06 was
Okay.
when that
We're halfway
list
through the
was
list. We've
adopted.
done 15% of the projects, and we've collected half the money we're going to get with SDCs for that time. When we get to the end of that 10-year, 20-year list, if we haven't completed all the projects that we've been charging everybody for along the way, we've been charging them the SDCs, I think they have a case, I'm no lawyer, to sue us and say, you put out this list and you've been charging us SDCs for 20 years based on those dollar amounts, and you didn't do the work you said you were going to do. And that concerns me. That's why I don't want to use parks SDCs for the park, because I think it adds things we didn't plan for to a list we are already overburdened with.
Sorry, have you finished?
No, ma'am. The other one here is, my question is these folks about the importance of speed. For example, you have private folks who've mentioned they're willing to kick in some cash too. I think there's a caveat to that, though, isn't there? That we begin that project immediately. I mean, if they got to wait 2 years before we ever get around to it, my guess is they're not going to be as interested in kicking in money.
And they may lose interest as,
Yeah.
period.
So there's a diminishing value to how much time we spend figuring this out. Last question. If we do this with urban renewal, can we still apply for the grants and then pay back on the debt with the grants that we may be successful in getting?
Yes, I think the grants just require a local match. I think they're relatively
200 or something.
indifferent.
Yeah.
Every grant has its own requirements, but they're indifferent as to how you generate those
So
funds.
if we wait if we submit the grant and wait to make a decision on urban renewal, we could lose the district, and we could end up getting a no or having this project take a long time. If we use urban renewal, we can still maybe get the grants to pay it back. Thank you.
Ask a
Back there,
question? Councilor Clark, your first part of that question, the $5 million, that was just for fiber, right? Or were you,
About both projects.
okay,
Parks.
and which of the parks options scenarios?
I like the Parks Plus.
Parks Blocks Plus. Okay, so we didn't cost that one out. The blank slate was estimated at 15 to 25 million. So a Parks Blocks Plus would be more than the 25 million.
Yeah.
So I didn't know if you wanted.
I'll take that back. I meant the other one.
Before I call the next counselor, I'd just like Glenn to respond to, because I don't like to leave that question in the air here, that the assumption that we're liable for something if we do something.
The short answer is we don't believe the city is liable if we do not complete the list. The list under SDCs can be amended going through a process. There are estimates of what we might be able to accomplish. So I respectfully disagree with Mike.
Good
I do not
Lord.
believe that the city would be liable.
But there's
That's
lawyers.
why we have him here. Yeah. All right, so Claire, you're next.
Thank you. So I just had a couple of questions, and maybe some of this can be brought back to us. So you mentioned a priority ranking for parks SDCs, which was relevant to Councilor Clark's question, and I was wondering if we could see that priority ranking, because I certainly don't have it in my head.
Just to clarify, priority ranking for what exactly?
There was a mention in the
20-year SDC list.
in the
list and-
presentation of our
Okay.
priority ranking for parks SDCs.
All right, so the list showing the priorities for each project. Easy.
That would be great, thank you. And then there was a brief mention of a downtown service district along with the downtown urban renewal district. And I think folks watching may not have any idea that there was such a thing as a service district. So I wonder if you could speak to that a little bit more. What are the distinctions between those two things? What's the mission of the service district? How is it governed? And what kind of funding does it have available?
So the Downtown Services District was brought forward, and I don't know how many years ago, but years ago. And it took some cooperation from the property owners, and I think a certain percentage, maybe two-thirds of the property owners basically consented to creating the district. It's an occupancy fee that's paid within the downtown core area. Those monies basically are passed on to DEI, and it's basically downtown safety. It's the guides program, it's graffiti removal, those kinds of services, but mostly it's the downtown guides service provision. The DEI board oversees how those funds are used and so forth under a contract with the City of Eugene. It doesn't have a sunset, but the property owners could ask council at any time with like two-thirds of the property owners coming forward to discontinue that. That hasn't been the case historically. I think the property owners in particular support those safety services downtown, so it's been gone on. It generates about, in the downtown district, I think about $230,000 a year roughly.
Great, thanks. So just some comments then. On the park blocks, I would probably lean towards a community engagement strategy if we were going to go for the blank slate or Park Blocks Plus approach. I don't think we should do a launch of a major redo of the space without public engagement. But if we decide for budgetary reasons that that's not really what we want to do, then I think the simple sprucing up would still have a lot of value, even if it wasn't tied into a more comprehensive look at downtown public spaces. I think relying on the 2006 plan isn't really the best way to go because it's 10 years old and we have a very different downtown than we had in 2006. And that price tag estimate for the blank slate is a pretty big challenge because that's almost the same as the cost of our new city hall. So I like the idea of taking a more comprehensive approach. That includes looking at that permanent location for the farmers market, but I feel like there's so much uncertainty about when that might happen, and I don't necessarily want to just wait for years and years to do something with the park blocks while we wait for that situation to be resolved. And then in terms of specific ideas for park blocks, sprucing up would be improve the overhead coverings, update those, open up the space, install a public restroom either nearby or at the park blocks. And I would suggest not going with a Portland Loo, which I think are just too industrial looking for that location, and instead design something that would fit into the surrounding area. And then a children's play area or some other amenity that would engage kids. I was also intrigued, I know this is kind of out there, but by the historic review of the blocks that we received last week that showed it used to be one big park without the intersecting streets. So I wonder if anyone has considered closing those streets and regaining that wonderful, huge park in the middle of downtown. But I know that's probably out there. And I'll take a second round.
Sounds vaguely familiar.
So I've got Alan and George Brown and Chris and Greg in the queue for the first round. I got Mike in for a second round, but before we go into that, it's already the time we're supposed to be finishing up this first section, and I will just put out there, I think it is important that we get this, not today, but I think it is important we get the community forum information out, so we need to get that up fast. And then I would say, given the amount of material to digest in this and the kind of thinking that this council needs to do about this, you may need to consider another whole work session before we get to the decision-making point so people can really get what they need to make some very difficult and challenging decisions. That's my thinking at this time. We can talk about it later, but I just wanted to put that out there so nobody would feel like we're rushing to something quickly that really deserves to have the full thought process of each and every one of you. Okay, Alan, you're next.
Yeah, I too would also like to see the telecom fund balance. I know you said you'd get back to us, but maybe you could ballpark it. If I recall correctly, we're using some of that for the new city hall, but not all of it. It was something like there was $2 million in it, and we're using $1 million for the city hall. Is that about right?
I don't know.
1.5, wasn't it?
You know, we just don't have that information, and we'll have to get back to you. I don't know what the ballpark is.
Okay, I'm making an assumption there's some money there, but not a lot, not enough anyway. I'd like to see a map overlaying the two urban renewal districts with the downtown fiber service district map. Those two things, see how they overlap. The downtown urban renewal district amendment process, if we did that, could we redirect the $500,000 for other uses? The farmers market has had 5 years to use that money with zero movement as far as I can tell, and the likelihood of them doing anything in the next year is probably zero. So could we amend it and use it within that time frame?
You could amend the plan to change the projects, including changing either that $500,000 or other money. But when you do a plan amendment, just like you did several years ago, you can change what the money can be used for. So yes.
Right. And well, the only money left is the $500,000 that's not allocated.
Right. But if you're doing a plan amendment, you can. The reason there's $500,000 left is because that's what the current plan allows for. But in the plan amendment, you can say the city or the urban renewal agency's maximum indebtedness amount can be increased. You say how much it can be increased to, and so then there would be more than $500,000 available.
Right, if we chose to do that. Or otherwise, if we let it terminate but amended it to redirect the $500,000 and we appropriated that in this year before it terminates, then we could use that money, but the urban renewal district would terminate anyway.
So just to clarify, it's not the urban renewal district that actually terminates, it's the collection of the tax increment financing. And there's a,
right.
the reason...
The district stays in place.
The district stays in place, as does the agency.
But it can't do anything.
Well, you can do things with other than tax increment funds, for example, the loan funds that Denny was talking about. So the urban renewal plan amendment process, if you gave us direction soon, next couple, 3 weeks, then it can be completed by summer. I don't think it would actually be in place by the time this budget year is over, so the money wouldn't actually be able to be appropriated for something else until next budget year.
Which is July 1.
Right.
Okay. Could that money be used for a comprehensive downtown parks assessment with a community engagement? Or does it have to be capital projects?
Money can be used for planning.
Yeah.
Let me get back to you on that one.
Okay. I'm assuming it could be. And the 2010 urban renewal decision to let it basically terminate when the debt service is paid off. Can you get us the details on that vote? Was that a unanimous vote? Does anybody remember? If you can get us the details on the specific
we'll
data,
get you the
that would be
stuff. I
good.
don't know.
Thanks.
I don't remember.
Does the GO bond, that falls under Measure 5. Does the levy also fall under Measure 5?
The GO bond would not fall under Measure 5. That's outside the cap.
Okay. What?
A general obligation bond is paid for by taxes that are outside the $10 limit.
Okay, so compression doesn't come into play.
Right, but for the operating levies, it does.
It does. And both of those require a vote.
Yes.
But the extension of the urban renewal district does not require a vote.
Correct. The council ultimately would approve that by ordinance. It's by a non-emergency ordinance, so the voters could choose to refer it to a vote.
So it's a referable ordinance.
Correct.
Unless it's...
Is the amendment to the plan a referable ordinance?
The amendment to the plan is accomplished by an ordinance. So it's basically incorporated into the ordinance.
All right. What's the earliest the GO bond or a levy could be done in terms of time frame? You have to get back to us on that.
November?
Well, if you want to hit an election that doesn't have a double majority requirement, November election would be the earliest that we could hit at this point. I think we're probably, I don't think we could hit the May election. But
How many months before would we have to decide?
in July.
In July, okay, thank you. I'd like to see also the SDC balance, fund balance, and that list that Claire was talking about.
Thank you. George Brown, you're up next.
Thank you, Mayor. We're going to be making a very big mistake if we try to extend the urban renewal district. This was one of the first things when I got on council in 2010, when the last amendment was made. We were very specific. Broadway parking garage, LCC, and $500,000 for farmers market improvements. The district is set to sunset this year in December. That will return $1 million approximately to the general fund every year from then on, starting next year. Promises were made to the taxpayers. That's one main reason this wasn't challenged at the ballot by taxpayers. The urban renewal scheme from 2 or 3 years before was challenged. It was soundly beaten at the ballot 2-1. So and in 2010 in May, when council voted for the amendment, the city manager and staff were very explicit on this point, as was council. This will be the last one. This will be the last one. And if, for whatever reason, a majority of this council decided to actually amend the plan yet one more time after everybody said we weren't going to do it anymore, we would increase the public mistrust of government. They say it's not transparent. They say one thing and do another. That's going to get us in big time trouble. And then if we did not refer this ourselves to the ballot, that will increase the electors' anger. So if a majority, for whatever reason, decides to go ahead and do this, we need to refer it to the voters. Otherwise, we're going to get in big trouble. There was some talk about the $500,000, and it says here, if the district terminates, the $500,000 would continue to be set aside for this purpose, for farmers market. So it doesn't really matter. It's not contingent upon extending the district, the life of the district, the life of the tax, the tax increment financing. We have to let that go. It's time to let it go. It's been almost 50 years. It'll be 50 years next year, I believe. It's time. That's the whole point of an urban renewal district. You set it up, you make the improvements, you divert the taxes from the general fund to pay for those improvements, and when it's all paid for and everything's all spiffy and nice like it is now, you let it go. You just have to let it go eventually.
Thank you, George. Chris?
Some of the things that have been mentioned at the table, I'm maybe a little bit confused about the urban renewal district mechanism. Did I hear you say that the district never goes away?
If I did, I didn't mean to say that.
Okay.
What I meant to say is that what will, in a sense, it's not quite automatic, but essentially automatically go away or has to go away is the ability to collect tax increment financing,
right,
which we're predicting will happen around December of this year. Certainly the council has the authority to terminate the district, but that would be an affirmative action on your part that would say, okay, now the district is gone. The existence of a district without tax increment financing is legal, You just have to fund activities with funds other than tax increment funds. And so that could be the loan money, it could be grants, it can be, a combination of things. It's just not the tax increment dollars that we're currently collecting.
Yeah, I guess what I was seeking to kind of differentiate between the existence of the district and the work of the district. And what I'm hearing is that the work of the district is based on the ability to raise money. In other words, you raise money to perform projects. That is set to expire in December when the projects that were being funded are no longer being funded. So as the project list is completed, the fund collection goes away, and so the district is not active. It's not collecting money, and it's not executing projects as of December.
It's a nuance, but it's the district would not be collecting tax dollars in order to fund projects. Right. The revolving loan fund would still be bringing funds back in that could still be loaned out. That could happen even without the district. It could be a city loan fund rather than an urban renewal agency loan fund.
But the point is, unless we were to, as you say, affirmatively vote, it could be in a dormant form, but the urban renewal district for downtown continues to exist. It just doesn't do anything.
Correct, and the plan does have a termination date, I think. The downtown plan doesn't? Okay.
Okay, unless you take affirmative action to end it, it just continues on, even though it's in a dormant form.
Correct.
Okay, maybe a revolving loan fund, but other than that, it's there on paper, but it never meets, it never does anything. It's just dormant, unless you take an affirmative action to end it. But what does expire in December is the project list, which we have been collecting money to execute.
What expires, and it's still an estimate because we don't know for sure how much tax dollar we're just going to get, is the ability to collect the tax increment dollars.
Right.
That's what would actually expire.
That's what actually expire. Right. So in the year 2017, the Urban Renewal District is not collecting any money. It's not performing any projects that involve tax collected money. And it exists, but it doesn't do anything. And at some point, say in 2019, a really worthwhile project comes along, and the City Council in 2019 says, we will activate the collection mechanism for this one project. And you create a plan to do it. That would be possible to do in 2019.
It would be possible to do it. What I can't tell you off the top of my head, and Sue is telling me she's not going to be able to tell you off the top of her head, is what that would look like at that stage. Because at that stage, to use the way George has explained it, and I think it's accurate, is that roughly, the tax increment dollars that are currently be collected by the agency then go to the overlapping taxing bodies. If you change the urban renewal plan in 2019, it's not like you then get to immediately start collecting all of the tax increment, the $2 million a year you used to collect. It could be you're going to have to start over. You're going to have to create new value and start collecting the taxes on the new value. So in year one, if you did that,
right.
And again, I would need to do some research and get back to you for sure, but I believe in year one of that new collection, you're collecting $2, right. Not $2 million.
Right. Understood. And that's fine. I just want to know if there's a difference between ending the collection project process and ending the district. And from what I'm hearing is, the discussion right now is terminating the collection and project part of the urban renewal district, but the district itself is not going away unless we affirmatively vote to do it. We may have to reset and start all over again, but the district itself is not going away. It's just going dormant.
I think practically speaking, that's accurate.
Okay. And then the last question was around the use of SDCs. They can't just be used for anything. There's a limitation on what SDCs can be used for. So what kinds of things would legally be able to be used in the park blocks?
So again, there's the list that goes with SDC. So with the Park and Rec System Plan coming your way on Monday, that you'll be in that conversation, and following will be a review of the methodology for that fee and the list of projects on it. So one of the determining factors is the project on the list that's incorporated into the methodology. So that's one thing. Secondly, you can use that funding for planning of the system and the development of the system, and for capital projects. So, for example, you saw in the presentation earlier that there's a downtown playground on the current list, and there's expansion of the park blocks on the current list, but not a new restroom in the park blocks on the current list. So just to, does that help?
Yeah.
Is that enough of an answer? Okay.
Greg, you're next.
I got a simpler question. So how long, if we voted to extend the downtown urban renewal district, what period of time would that be? Is that a 2-year period? That's question one. And then the next question is that would we be project constrained around the specific uses for funding of that fund?
So your first question, the answer is it depends on the amount of projects that you would be including. Once you create the debt, you lose the ability to terminate the district or to terminate the tax collections until the debt's paid off. So if, just because I like round numbers, if you said we're going to come up with a project list and it's going to total $10 million of additional debt at roughly $2 million a year that we're collecting, practically speaking, you would be extending the district and the tax increment collections for 5 years, because it's just the $10 million divided by the $2 million we get per year. Okay. In terms of the projects that can be included, you can either be very specific the way you were in 2010, LCC, Farmers Market, Broadway garages, or you can be more general, which is the way the Riverfront Urban Renewal Plan is set up, and it will say you can use dollars for example, street improvements, sidewalk improvements, purchase property to clear the sites to make it available for redevelopment. It doesn't have to list the specific streets that you're talking about. So it can be as specific as you want, or it can be more general than that.
More general, but not necessarily vague, but we have some general idea of, specific items that we would be funding in terms of those improvements.
Correct.
And that would be part of the list of, basket of items that would be fundable by the district.
Right, and in part you have to do that because otherwise there's no way to estimate what the amount of debt
payback is. Yeah,
is that we would be including, because part of, if you decide to amend the plan, part of it is to say here's the new number for maximum indebtedness that the district can incur, and we need to base that on something. And so it would be on, here's either the very specific or the more general project list, and we'd come up with an estimate based on that.
So we could, in essence, say, if we extended the district and say we had $3.8 million for fiber optics and that's it, we could do it that way, or we could do that as part of a package with other improvements to park blocks and that kind of thing. But we could say, we could do an extension, say, this is it, we're doing, the high-speed fiber, and also listing the collateral benefits that come along with that, with school districts and other entities that could access that infrastructure.
You can include as explanation,
and part of the explanation of why we would be moving forward with that extension. Got it. Okay.
So I have 4 signed up for round 5, signed up for round 2. But before that, I have a couple questions. So furniture for downtown was part of the thing that you talked about. And do we have furniture in storage? Where is the furniture we used to have?
We do. There was some storage in the Kesey Square. It used to be in a little storage shed that got demolished, and so it's currently being stored in the atrium building right now. Farmers Market didn't have a place to put it, and they managed that program for us, so we're storing it in the atrium temporarily until we find a
And
home
the
for
benches
it.
and things that used to be around town, are they still stored somewhere, or something happened with them?
Bricks. I'm not familiar with
Maybe we
where
can have
benches went.
a look
but
and
yeah.
see what's out there, so we really understand what we already have, that you can put back to use again. I concur with Betty that I think the public, since that's, you'll hear that from the community forum, that restrooms have been brought up for everybody's use. I would point out, however, that we do have restrooms by the park blocks currently, and we do have restrooms by the farmers market currently. What I would like is a report on their usage and how they're doing. We put 5 downtown a year or so ago, and I don't know whether what the current status is with them in terms of who uses them, who doesn't, what condition they're in. Any of those kinds of things would be helpful. The downtown plan, we can amend the downtown plan?
The urban renewal plan? The urban renewal plan? Yes, for the downtown district.
Well, I was just thinking of the downtown plan itself that talks about the great streets and all of that. We really have, this to me seems like part of that robust discussion about what was said years ago and what we think we want to have happen now.
Yeah, we're 10 years into the downtown plan, and we have been talking about some kind of update, not a full-blown let's start all over, but there's still some projects that we need to be done. There are a lot of projects that have been done. We've been really successful. So we've been talking about some kind of quick update because things have changed and downtown have changed.
It'd be great to have an update and for council to really take a look in the context of what we're talking about now, about whether some of that has changed. We want to do some of it. We don't want to do other, and maybe some of the thinking that comes out of this can be part of that change of the plan. And I also think that we have to kind of take a view, whatever this council decides to do, of what that thing that I think I say a lot is say where you want to get in the long run. We may not be able to go there now, but you can take steps, but it doesn't mean that you should say no to everything that you can't afford to do now. So I think we have to have that kind of look at where we want to go. That will change over time. I hear a lot about people's fear of losing public space, so I think it's really important for them to know that we actually aren't trying to lose public space. We're actually trying to gain public space and use it differently. The other question, I saw the children's playground on the list. Do we have anything in there around things for youth in our downtown?
Skate park? Nothing, I'm sorry.
No, I'm just saying. What I'm saying is, I know what you see some youth doing that you don't want to see doing. I'm more interested in what are we going to do as if we do things, make things different to not only accommodate small children, but really have something in it for our youth as well. And I wanted to make a point that the loan fund to me is. I'll suck myself.
Put yourself in the second round.
I will say the loan fund is one of the most successful tools we've had at helping our economic growth, and I really want us to have that understanding. So, second round, Mike.
Thank you, Mayor. Before I ask Glenn this question, I just want to be 100,000% clear that I'm not suggesting I think this is the way to go. I just want to know the answer to clarify something. If we create an emergency ordinance, do we need 6 votes or 8?
If you want, you need 6 votes in order to have an ordinance that is immediately effective, but which is what traditionally has been called an emergency ordinance.
And cannot be referred to the voters.
Cannot be referred to the voters. However, if you're talking about an urban renewal plan amendment, you cannot do that because state statute specifically says it has to be adopted by non-emergency ordinance.
I thought I heard you say that earlier, and that's why I was asking just for the sake of clarity. But we can't do that, and that's good. But I must say, I think I differ with my friend George on this one. I agree with him that there are many people that don't like tax increment financing in our urban renewal district. I also agree with him there was a lot of conversation in the community just exactly like he described it. I would suggest, though, that if you put that question, shall we have this kind of fiber connectivity in our downtown for a few years extra on the district or not, I think that the city would win the vote to do so. I really do, despite what's been the previous conversation. So that part does not, I'm not overly concerned about that part, although I recognize there are many, many people who would be against that on principle. I get it. One of the other pieces here that we're not really discussing, I think, relative to its weight, relative to its importance about this, relative to its gravity as a part of whether we do something or not, is speed. One of the things we're not talking about, how does the passage of time affect the status of some of the things on this list? In other words, like I mentioned before, the longer it takes us, the less likely we'll get any private participation. The longer it takes us to do some of this, the technology will catch up, and there will be other ways to go about it. The longer we wait to do this, we're less special for doing it. Right? So all of these, and there's less businesses interested in the idea, they'll save less money. There are reasons why speed is a very important part of us doing this as soon as possible, or getting started as soon as possible. Can you at least confirm for me what I'm saying?
I think you are. You're right. There's We've heard businesses threaten to leave. There was one that was in the Broadway Commerce Center, and now he's got fiber, and I don't hear from him anymore. He's very happy and busy, and absolutely, if we don't do this, we risk losing existing firms. We certainly won't be able to grow as fast as we could.
It's not just doing it or not doing it. It's doing it now as opposed to doing it a year from now that matters, or getting started now before 20 other cities already have this. This relative speed of when we start matters, doesn't it?
I think it does. It would give our city a competitive advantage, but also allow us to build up and diversify our tech community here. And if we have gained traction with the tech community, we've had so many successes in the last couple of years with it.
Yeah.
And if we don't build the infrastructure that they're in particular of need of, we risk losing those gains that we've made, and it may have a permanent impact on the mix of the economy.
Of waiting? What's the cost of waiting in all different ways you can think about it? The cost, if we wait till next year or the year after to really get started on something like this, what's the cost? Not in dollars, but in how many companies do you think would get discouraged in our downtown core? What is the cost?
I think one of the things we learned from the tech sector is they have a pretty short attention span because things move really quickly in their world, and I think we've kind of put ourselves out there because there's a lot of excitement about this program. We've done the pilot, we put it out there, we've had these discussions yet. We don't necessarily know all the funding sources, but we know because speed does matter, and we agree that speed does matter. We're pushing for it as if this is going to happen because we think it's very important. But there's some holes to fill, and funding is obviously the big hole to fill. But and it's why I think we just keep push forward and hope we can figure out the funding solution somewhere along this track as we go along. And we really haven't slowed down. We're keeping moving forward, and this discussion hopefully will push us a little bit forward closer to that funding decision, because I think that's going to be challenging. But we do agree that speed does matter. The technology changes, the companies change. There's a great opportunity right now because we have this little growing innovation district downtown that's really, really thriving. If you went to the RAIN event, there were 400 plus people, entrepreneurs there, and I think it's really important. So speed does matter.
Will you connect the dots for me as a last question? How long will it take to do some of these different funding options? Are there ones that will, quote, under those circumstances, take too long?
I think, yeah, probably so, yes. If we have to go to the voters, for example, that's a long process and so forth. But our hope is that we kind of stay on a parallel track. We are figuring out the funding options as we're zeroing in on the technical aspects of the fiber plan and the park plan, and how much exactly is it going to cost and how we're going to implement it. And at some point in the next maybe 6 months, we reach a point where we figured out what we want to do and how we're going to pay for it, and that we're on this parallel track. And I think I just threw that out because I don't. We still have some technical aspects of the fiber plan downtown. Obviously, we have some work to do with community engagement around the parks and so forth. So I'm assuming it's not going to happen next week. There's going to be some time period to get there. Hopefully, it's not years, it's months.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to try to get the last four in before we're out of time, but I did want to say that I think we all understand that speed does make a difference, but I also want to say that we want people to understand, as I think you spent time at the beginning of your presentation today, that this isn't just to benefit the tech businesses. It is to benefit the tech businesses so they can benefit our community and help with everything that we need to have done. And I think we have to keep putting those things together so that it doesn't set one part of our community against the other part of our community. This is about lifting all boats. And as for me, and I think everybody, the thing we care about the most is that families in Eugene have jobs that pay good wages, that they can raise their kids and do well. And so we're working really hard to strengthen our economy to really make sure that that happens in a better way. We just got a poverty report that came out today or yesterday. 45% of Layton County lives in poverty. That is not acceptable. That's what this is about to me. This is not about benefiting one person, two, or even 400. This is about benefiting our community and our families, and that's a top job we have as a council and working for this city. Claire, you're next.
Yeah, thank you for those comments, Mayor. So I appreciate the urgency that Councillor Clark is trying to generate, but as I whispered to Councillor Polling, the pace of government. When we're discussing the use of public funds, it's important that we take the time to deliberate and inform the public as we're doing today. So sometimes it does go much slower than business would be able to operate for that reason. And since we aren't going to get to the Downtown Solutions Forum update, I will just mention that benches and seating areas downtown, not just at the park blocks, are a big desire for people who frequent downtown. And that seems like a place to me that we might engage private contributions, perhaps a program that lets downtown businesses sponsor and maintain a bench. And it would have their name and even maybe a logo on it. So on the fiber optic network, which I didn't get to speak to, I really appreciate the mayor's comments about that. It's not just about benefiting businesses downtown. And also, while it might be an important consideration for firms that are considering Eugene as a new location, for me, an even more compelling reason for us to support it is it's a way to grow and keep our local companies that are already launched or might be established in the next few years. And I think that's a huge consideration. And then on the funding question, setting aside the political issue and past council action, it seems to me that for both projects that using urban renewal dollars is the most logical choice. I recognize that there are political issues, but it would be most cost effective, and these projects are exactly the kinds of projects that urban renewal dollars are meant to support. Perhaps a referral to the voters would be a way to keep trust and to know that they support this method of funding improvements in our downtown. I tend to agree with Councilor Clark that this would probably garner a yes vote from the public if it was explained properly. The work of downtown is not done as far as I'm concerned. There is still much to do to make it a place we can all feel safe and welcome. And I also tend to agree with Councilor Polling that going out for another bond for this work gives me pause. I don't like to fracture our funding up in that way either. I'm all for finding new revenues for things voters want, but I think we need to be cautious about how we do that. And at this point, I'm not necessarily prepared to put the Park Blocks project ahead of other parks development and maintenance needs that have been identified for my ward, which are pretty significant. So those are some of my thoughts about the funding.
Yeah, I would like us to see us do a comprehensive downtown parks assessment with community engagement. Get 2,000 or 3,000 more people there downtown. How much? And part of that, I'd like to see how much is current use of the different parks. What do we need? How does that work? And it seems like what we're doing now is kind of piecemealing this. So a more comprehensive approach that looks at in its entirety would be a preferred way to go. I'd like to see some information brought back about how to amend the urban renewal district to use the $500,000 for a comprehensive parks plan. also agree that the downtown loan fund has been very successful, but doesn't need an urban renewal district to go forward. Also wanted to see the SDC fund balance and that priority list. I think we're going to get that. And it precedes my time on council, so I don't know how that was approved. Is that a council-approved plan? It is, okay. So maybe a little history when we do that, too. I think that everybody believes on the council that the fiber project is a good project. It's a very good thing for us to do, a good thing for spend public monies on, and it will create lots of jobs and hopefully, and well-paying jobs at that. I think the difference or discussions about how do we pay for it. Speed is important, but we don't even have a plan yet. It's the difference between urban renewal district and the other options is really only a matter of months, not years. So let's be careful about how we talk about that. Does the urban renewal amendment process require a public hearing because it's an ordinance? It does. Yes. Okay.
Both in front of the Planning Commission and the City Council.
Okay. So that all takes time, which is why it won't be done overnight, and neither will any of the other options, but it's really a matter of just a couple of months probably in the end, not years take to do any one of these options. I kind of agree with what George said, that when we talked about the downtown urban renewal district, it would go away after we pay for it with this final project in LCC in December 2016. In fact, we added as a majority vote, it said, it is the intent of this plan that there be no amendments, substantive or otherwise. That couldn't have been clearer. And to then amend and extend is just a gigantic big never mind. We didn't really mean what we said, you might say that the urban renewal district was necessary if that it was the only funding mechanism for moving forward, but that's not the case. There are multiple different ones. Disingenuous to say, well, things have changed. Well, if things have changed, and then our word would never be solid. So if we were going to do this and extend the urban renewal district, then we need to put this out in front of the voters and have them bless it. And I agree. I think it would probably pass. But if we're going to extend the district, I don't think we should do it just by council. Vote.
Chris?
Just quickly. I'm also one of the people that was there when we did that, and I've also read that, and I recognize that we said we were not going to renew it, and I think you have to focus on the goal. I mean, it's the outcome. Do the means justify the ends? And I don't believe in extending an urban renewal district just to extend an urban renewal district. I don't believe in having projects just to have projects. I think that would be something that would break faith with the public. And I think that if you don't have a project that is worth being funded, then you do let the urban renewal district go into stasis. And so the notion of, well, under no circumstances would we consider a project as being worthwhile enough to consider is not a good way to go. Now, are these projects sufficiently worthy to consider that? I think that is a legitimate question, and I think we should consider that. I, for one, might see these as being appropriate projects for an urban renewal district, but I don't know if everybody would see it that way. I'm not opposed to extending an urban renewal district if the project, if the need justified that solution, but I don't want to just go with it because it's the one that seems like the easiest. I, like Claire, agree. This seems like a very elegant and worthwhile and doesn't have an impact on the taxpayers. You're already collecting the money, so you're not increasing taxes. You're going with what's already there. But once again, the projects have to be justifiable. I agree we probably should get the public sense on it, but if you've ever tried to explain tax increment financing to anybody, blood comes out their nose. I mean, you cannot explain tax increment financing to a person so that they can really understand it. So the challenge with going to the public is trying to make this understandable in terms of what they are actually agreeing to or not agreeing to, which means any campaign would be filled with an enormous amount of misinformation and misdirection. So we would have to be very careful to think about how we would do that. I'm not opposed to it, but you're taking to the public one of the most complicated forms of financing for them to, which is probably why urban renewal districts are not generally something you do take to the public, because it is so unbelievably complicated and requires a high level of expertise to even understand how the mechanism works. So it's just something to think about. I would only extend an urban renewal district's debt limit to keep it from having to reset. I mean, if you can continue to collect the amount of money you're collecting now, that's definitely a consideration. I don't want to have to go back to $2. It would be great if we could collect what we have. But it's got to be in a way where the project truly justifies this dramatic step that we're taking. And I think that's a good conversation to have. Do these projects truly justify that? I think they do.
George, you're the last.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to quote another passage from our current downtown urban renewal plan, in addition to the one that Councilor Zelenka quoted. Quote, except for these three projects, the agency will not initiate additional projects to be funded with tax increment dollars after the date of this amendment. So what I've been hearing now is all this talk of basically violating our plan, the intent of our plan. Oh, well, that was 2006. Hey, things change. I know we said these two things, but that doesn't really matter. That's how we sold it. We sold it. Nobody challenged it. We sold it because we told people it was going to end. So, yes, we can violate the intent of the plan. And basically, by doing that, we violate our promise to the voters, to the electors, to the citizens. And it does have budgetary impacts by keeping this thing going, because those tax increment funds always stay in the district, always. They don't go to the general fund. They can't be used for other worthy projects all around town. They're just used for downtown. And I see a lot of people, and they want it to end. They want it to end so that the dollars can be used in their neighborhoods for worthy projects. Downtown isn't the only... Look, I love downtown. Duh, I work downtown. I've been downtown for 45 years, every working day. So you cannot call me an anti-downtown person. It's just... but it does. That is the budgetary impact on the general fund. You keep it going. Because if this flies, if it's not referred to the voters, that would be a terrible. We're basically showing the voters contempt. Oh, well, we broke our promise to you. Oh, and now you have to go out and do the work and do all the legwork and get it referred to the ballot. We're not even going to refer it to the ballot to you to see if you approve of our violation of the plan. Because here's what's going to happen, and this has happened through the whole history of our downtown urban renewal district. We say it's going to end at a certain date, then it gets close to that date, and the majority of council votes to extend it. And then it happens again, and then it happens again. And the last time was 2006. Councilor Clark's now wants to make it go till 2017, 2020, who knows, whatever. That hasn't been arrived at yet. Okay, but we swear, we promise to you, this will be the last time. But then it'll get close to the date. What will the next thing be? Because I'll guarantee you that's what happens if we let it keep going. That's exactly what's going to happen. It will never end.
All right. On that note, we're going to close the meeting for today. Thank you.
Thank you very much.